In today's Chicken Bites episode, Fred Hume, MD of Hume International, joins us to offer insights on anti-competitive and anti-consumer trade policies affecting poultry trade in South Africa. Thank you for joining us once again, Fred, and welcome. The local poultry industry continues to advocate for stricter anti-dumping duties. Given that the industry is already well protected, how do you foresee further restrictions on poultry imports affecting market competition, chicken prices, and the overall market dynamics?
Jen, I think at this stage, if we're speaking about additional anti-dumping duties on bone-in chicken, I believe it's purely academic. You would know as well as I do, how volumes have declined over the past 7 or 8 years. In fact, they've declined by tenfold. From the heyday when South Africa was importing around 35,000 tons of bone-in chicken, we're lucky if we import 3,000 tons a month these days. So more anti-dumping duties are not going to change anything. I believe that us as importers and, in fact, the South African consumer are already locked out of international bone-in chicken for all intents and purposes.
With the impending risk of South Africa being excluded from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, what do you believe would be the immediate and long-term effects on South African exports and imports, particularly in the poultry sector?
Well, the South African government, they seem hell-bent on upsetting, the American authorities. We've voted against the US at just about every international, in any international forum, we've had an opportunity to do so. We, of course, are recipients of US aid and have been for many, many years. It just doesn't fit well with me, extending a hand, for handouts on the one hand, and then, shall I say, basically, spitting in the face of those that are supporting you. So essentially, I think South Africa has cooked its goose here. I don't know if there's much more that can be done. Taking Israel to the International Criminal Court was probably the last straw. This thing is much bigger than chicken. Jen, in fact, of late, we haven't been importing anything really substantial in terms of poultry from the US anyway. So short term, not going to make much of a difference. But of course, if we are excluded from AGOA, I would expect that South Africa would then can the quota on US chicken. And this would then mean that, when the cycle turns and market conditions are favorable, we unfortunately won't be able to partake, in imports from that country. It's important to recognize and bear in mind, though, that AGOA only allowed us, or the quota on bone-in chicken from the US that stemmed from AGOA only rebates the anti-dumping duty of almost 10 Rand a kilo, but the general tariff of 62% remains in play. And that, by and large, has been a hurdle too high, too far. We just haven't been able to make it work. Other markets are able to pay more with lower duties and tariffs in place than ourselves.
The media sentiment seems to be very much that it is already a foregone conclusion that South Africa is going to be excluded from AGOA.
For me, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. South Africa is a small, open economy. We export, 20 odd % of Africa's exports originate in South Africa. So it just goes to show how important exports are to us. And if you're serious about exports, you have to be very careful about excluding imports from your trading partners. And the US is an extremely important trading partner. In fact, after China, the second biggest. And of course, then we add to that the American aid that is doled out and dished out in this country. It's unwise in my opinion, and it would be very sad. Other industries are probably going to suffer more. If you look at automotive, our citrus industry, the ramifications are great.
What solutions and policies do you propose that would benefit both local poultry producers and consumers, ensuring a balance between protecting the local industry and maintaining fair market competition?
Well, Jen, some interesting developments of late. You would no doubt be aware of of this whole debacle surrounding the potential increase in VAT, and then also the zero rating of VAT on essential foodstuffs. We ourselves have been calling for government to zero rate VAT on edible offal. The local poultry industry have been calling on government to rebate VAT on bone-in chicken portions. I don't believe that would be a solution, and I don't believe that it will benefit the intended beneficiaries. Why I say that is importers, and as I mentioned earlier, the South African consumer are already locked out of bone-in chicken. The domestic producers don't have to compete with imports, and therefore I believe that they will quickly capture any reduction in price. It's very different for offal. Here we faced with a more reasonable 30% import duty, which we believe there are arguments for that to be lowered or scrapped entirely, especially on certain items such as chicken livers, which are used extensively in the school feeding scheme program, etc. But government has, I think, made the right moves there. At the end of the day, something like an increase in VAT is a regressive tax. How do you address or remedy that? Well, you basically rebate that increase or the VAT in its entirety on essential foodstuffs. And this seems to be what government has decided to do. And I really hope that it doesn't get derailed and it actually goes through. This would be a big win for South Africa, for the already embattled consumer. As I certainly feel that it's the right way to go. I mean, if you were to rebate the duty as well as VAT on something like chicken liver, chicken necks, chicken carcasses, you will effectively, with a stroke of a pen, halve the cost of this product. That's a massive change in a country that's already facing significant levels of malnutrition. So I must really applaud government for doing what they did, here, and I really hope that it does see the light of day, this initiative.
In light of the Trump administration's threats to remove South Africa from AGOA, what strategies or lobbying efforts do you think South Africa should undertake to secure its membership and continue benefiting from this trade agreement?
All I can say is that I firmly believe that if it was up to me, I would back the US on this one. Considering the bilateral trade that takes place between the two countries, as well as I say, the transfer of knowledge and us being a major beneficiary of their largesse, so to speak. But again, I do believe that this is not in our hands. And if South Africa were to lose access to AGOA, of course, we would need to scramble and find alternative export markets for our automotive components and the citrus we spoke about earlier. Not such an easy thing, considering that we already ship significant volumes of fruit and motor vehicles to the EU, the other major market. Sending motor vehicle components to China would be like sending ice to Alaska. So I don't think that's gonna benefit us. So yeah, really very scary, very worrying. I do think that if we lose access to the AGOA program, it would have significant ramifications in terms of a weakening of the exchange rate, increase in bond yields, interest rates, all of this, that would further compound and slow an already stagnant economy.
Considering the recent outbreaks of avian diseases in major poultry exporting countries, and the USA in particular, how can South Africa balance the need for stringent biosecurity measures with the necessity of maintaining a stable and competitive poultry market?
Well, Jen, South Africa already imposes some of the most stringent biosecurity phytosanitary measures of any importing country in the world that I'm aware of. We've been actively lobbying and asking, that South Africa follow international best practice and reopen markets that have been officially declared free of bird flu. Soon after them being declared free. And this was always the case. South Africa then changed it and introduced some, shall I say, rather bizarre regulations and requirements, insisting that vets visit the country of origin to essentially determine that the country was in fact free of bird flu. And unfortunately, I failed to understand, the benefit to be derived from that. All I can say is that I would personally view that and consider that to be another barrier to trade, a non-tariff barrier to trade. But if South Africa could follow international best practice and resume resume opening markets as soon as they've been declared free, this will give us access to a much greater universe of product, which us as importers could then, source product from. And we've also been very vociferous, asking for government to introduce a heat treatment protocol, particularly on MDM. Now, a heat treatment protocol already exists for pork, dealing with the PRRS, porcine reproductive respiratory syndrome. It already exists. It's in place. It's already been vetted. You just have to replace pork with poultry, and off we go. Considering that South Africa currently imports around 80% of its chicken, at least from Brazil, and with no regionalization in policy, which is another point we need to make. Regionalization is imperative. Brazil's almost the size of an entire continent. If you have an outbreak in any corner of Brazil, the entire country gets shut down, and we lose access to 80% of our poultry imports. It seems crazy to me. And a good example, of course, is Canada. Canada has been locked out of South Africa for many years. Have a look at the map, and you see how vast Canada is. It's impossible to think that you could apply a ban on the basis of country borders rather than a radius around the affected area or outbreak, etc., as is the case for regionalization, which has been adopted for imports of poultry from the USA. So again, this protocol is in place. South Africa has already agreed to regionalization with the US. Why not extend that to countries such as Brazil, Canada, and other European countries? If you look at Poland, for instance, Namibia and Poland agreed to regionalization. We ship a lot of Polish chicken to Walvis Bay for sale in Namibia, of course, not for South Africa. I think our neighbors, and in fact, if I may hasten to add, the same applies to Botswana. So our neighbors are one up on us here. They used to follow, and we were the leaders. Well, I think in many respects, it's changed. The shoe's on the other foot now.
In conclusion, what is your response to the concerns of the local poultry industry, which believes that increased access to import markets jeopardizes local production and job creation?
Jen, when I started in this business 15, 16 years ago, we imported a vast array or range of chicken products. Currently, we are down to importing chicken offal and MDM. We don't import breast or hardly in any volume at all, boneless leg meat, chicken trimmings, all of that. Because of the introduction of these anti-competitive, anti-trade, draconian import tariffs, duties, dumping duties, all of these things, we've essentially been reduced to importing MDM and chicken offal. That's all we've got left. How could that be considered a threat, to the local poultry industry, which relies on selling IQF, individually quick frozen chicken portions, and they have that market almost entirely to themselves. We can't compete because of anti-dumping duties of up to 250%. How questionable at best, but okay, we accept that. Let's accept then that these anti-dumping duties are akin to a wealth tax. So you say that wealthier South Africans consume bone-in chicken. Okay, well, we impose a sort of a wealth tax by locking out imports. Of course, those consumers that buy this product pay more for it than they would have, if imports were possible and viable. But to think of extending this to offal, which the local industry already don't produce enough of, to MDM, which they don't produce at all, well, that would be cruel, in my opinion. You'd be robbing millions of people of a protein source that they couldn't otherwise afford, merely to enrich yourself. Speaking now from a local producer's perspective, I can't believe that anyone could be that inhuman.
Thank you for joining us today on Chicken Bites, and we hope to have you on the next episode.